Hello everyone, Avid Thinker here, and this is going to be my second micro podcast on this channel. Today we're going to be talking about morals, ethics, and the collapse of moral certainty following World War II. Now, one thing I'd just like to open with is the idea that people use moral and ethical terms in their everyday lives. You probably don't stop to consider it, but many of the decisions you make are based on your own ideas of morals. For example, the ideas of fairness, right and wrong, and conscience are all universally recognized and play a big role in individual and societal decision making. Well, the real question is, what is the difference between morals and ethics? Morals are a set of personal beliefs and ideas regarding right and wrong that help individuals make decisions in their day-to-day lives. On the other hand, ethics are communal or societal guidelines implemented to govern human action based on moral ideas. However, as a whole, ethics or morals refers to standards and practices that tell us how human beings ought to act in many situations in which they find themselves. It is very important that the listener recognizes the difference between these two. I believe that we humans do not assign values to actions, but that every action is either just or unjust based on a higher moral law. So, any of the moral or ethical actions that we humans choose to take are ultimately governed by some higher objective moral law that helps us compare our own laws and decisions to it. I believe this due to the fact that without any objective moral law, society falls apart. We cannot judge the actions of any person as right or wrong because it is simply our opinion. As C.S. Lewis said in Mere Christianity, what is the sense in saying the enemy is on the wrong side unless right is a real thing which the Nazis knew at the bottom as well as we did and ought to have practiced? If they had no notion of what we meant by right, then we could no more have blamed them for that than the color of their hair. He's pointing out that we cannot even say that the Nazis were wrong because it's only our opinion. If society were to come together and decide the Nazis actually were right and that their decision-making was correct, then we would just have to say that's right if there is no objective moral law that we can compare the actions of the Nazis to. Now let's dive into some popular ideas about how we decide whether an action is moral or not. So the first major body of thought I'm going to be discussing is utilitarianism. This is a 19th century idea that was developed by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, which basically says that actions are good if they benefit the most people or have the greatest balance of good over evil. In other words, it judges actions by their outcomes, not by their nature. Basically, this is a prevailing school of thought that many philosophers hold to, and it's very easily demonstrated in the trolley problem. In the trolley problem, you are a railway conductor, and in front of you, you have a lever which can divert a train from a track to another track. On the first track, there are 5 people tied down who will all get run over and killed if you do not pull the lever. On the top track, there's only one singular person. Now, utilitarianism argues that you should pull the lever and kill the one person and save the lives of the 5 because killing 5 people is worse than killing a single person. However, I believe that this ideology is actually flawed. I believe, firstly, that it's too vague. It either borrows from objective moral standards. For example, if a utilitarian philosopher were to say that they need to maximize the amount of good, I would simply ask them, well, what is good? Secondly, I think that it justifies harming people for the benefit of a majority. Since utilitarianism always discusses the outcome of the action rather than the action itself, it justifies killing or murdering, stealing, lying, as long as it benefits, I will put the word benefits in quotation marks here, as long as it benefits a majority of people. And I think this is actually a very flawed way to view life, and it's a way you can justify actually evil and immoral actions by saying that it, quote-unquote, benefits a majority. Now, another school of thought is the idea of fairness, which says that actions are good if they equally benefit all parties involved. For example, someone who takes the fairness argument would say that both favoritism and discrimination are unjust, and therefore equality is always something to be strived for, or always something to strive for. I believe that this is also a flawed way to view morality, as it interprets actions by their outcomes by saying that everything needs to be equal. And again, this is just a very flawed way to view life. If all morality is seen by the outcomes, then really in the moment, no action can be judged as good or bad. Now I would like to move into the idea of why our society has gone so far to the stance of utilitarianism and why we generally tend to view morality as something which can change or which everybody can have an opinion on. And this is why I'd like to go into the collapse of moral certainty following World War II. So modern day, we tend to view morality as something which everybody can have a different opinion on. So we use phrases like my truth and your truth in order to convince each other that we can reshape reality in any way that we like. And this is largely due to the reaction against moral certainty following World War II. Now, the listener may be wondering what I'm referring to. Well, since many of the atrocities of World War II stemmed from the rigid racial ideological morality of the Nazis, post-war Western society tended to be afraid of black and white thinking in favor of amorphous ideas of right and wrong. This shaped modern society into a machine which functions on the basis of Judeo-Christian morals, but tries to ignore them by pretending it can just do what it wants all the time. This is the main reason for the collapse of moral certainty, but I believe that we need to get back to a time when there was a universally recognized standard of right and wrong. Many of the most foundational moral frameworks come from Jesus and the Bible. For example, the ideas of the sanctity of human life, for example, do not murder, the sixth commandment, and do not to steal or covet or to lust, are all good ideas that I think that people should strive for, but instead we try to prevaricate and beat around the bush in order to reshape the world around us in the way that we see fit, instead to do what we want instead of what actually would benefit us. For example, the biblical idea of self-sacrifice is one of the most universally recognized themes of all time, putting others before yourself. And many movies use this, not so much of a trope, but this kind of cliche or this idea to rope people in, because we always recognize that putting other people before ourselves is an undeniably true and good thing to do, no matter what society you go into. And it is clear to me that we just need to get away from this new idea of doing whatever we want and get back to biblical truth in order that we can benefit each other, uplift each other, and help each other grow as a society into a new future. That's it for today, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this second episode of Avid Thinker, and I hope to get back to you very soon. I hope you all enjoy your New Year's, and I pray that you would have a blessed week and a blessed 2026.